that's good.
And so we're talking about, again, before I went on camera, Adweek just got a redesign?
Yeah, Adweek.com got a redesign recently that really did a great job integrating the blog. Like a lot of media, magazines and media, the blog had kind of existed off on its own a little bit for a long time, and they did a great job with this new redesign. If you haven't been to Adweek.com, go, or Adfreak.com. The nice thing is they all take it to the same place. The blog fits really well within the site. The traffic's done fantastic for both, but I just think it's a great example of how mainstream media, for all the criticism it gets, they really are, some of them are doing a great job of finally seeing the value of blogs and bringing them in and seeing that we're different, but we bring a lot of value to the equation too.
So what do you focus on mainly on Adweek?
We write about new ad campaigns, controversial ad campaigns. We like to focus on the sexy, the controversial, the disturbing. We get a lot of hits on disturbing stuff. We do a freakiest ads every year where we recap the freakiest ads from around the world for every year. That's always a massive traffic thing, every year. And just there are some really freaky stuff out there.
Give me an example. Come on, like a real one.
Oh man, I don't know. It's always like PSAs. It's always the ones for domestic abuse and stuff where like people's skin getting ripped off and stuff where you're just like, yeah, but they can get away with that when you're, it's for a good.
PETA ads too.
Yeah, PETA ads. I think that was the one I was probably thinking of. There's one where like they gutted a stripper like a fish. Yeah. But, the thumbnail of the stripper got a lot of traffic, and then the payoff was, really disturbing. So, hey, whatever it takes to get people reading.
Reminds me of back in the earlier days of the internet, rotten.com.
Oh, ooh, yeah.
Kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah. I know. I don't have a clue what you're talking about.
No, of course you don't.
Never went to it. But, yeah.
Oh, so what brings you to Blog World besides the fact that you write and edit a blog?
Well, this is my second Blog World in a row. Did October in Las Vegas. Was invited to speak then about case studies of marketing and social media marketing and whether it's working. With Adweek, I'd see and kind of pay attention to a lot of the more obscure marketing things that either go really well or crash and burn.
Yeah.
And so I co-presented with Dave Peck, who works with Meshin, and it was a big hit. The session was really popular last year, so they asked us to come back, and this time to focus explicitly on failure. So we did an entire set of case studies of social media fail and what we can learn from it, and it was interesting.
You know what I'm going to ask next, right?
Whether.
Come on, what was the biggest failure? The biggest one that you've talked about, or maybe not biggest in the typical terms, but that would just kind of maybe be a surprise failure even.
Well, the one that I really enjoyed was because I like finding the ones nobody knows about, at least here. And so in Singapore, there were some really weird ones. Singapore is having this social media revolution, and they had a great case where this young man, a 27-year-old, had fallen in love with a 49-year-old woman, and their relationship, there were a lot of weird hang-ups in Singapore. People didn't dig that, and so they started a Facebook page to get people to support them and to give them their blessings, and it worked. They got thousands of people, they got all these followers on YouTube, and they said, thanks, we're going to stream our wedding. You guys helped make it happen. And then at the end of this wedding video, the guy says, oh, I forgot the ring, jumps out of the car and gets hit by a car, and then a thing pops up saying, get life insurance. And it was all a fake thing that dragged on for like 2 months and got all these people completely fooled. And then it's an ad for insurance. And people flipped. And I don't mean got upset. I mean
they planned all that?
Yeah, it was all a big hoax, basically, although they thought they were doing some cool, viral marketing. And
so wait, they weren't even really a couple? They didn't really get married? This was all one big hoax for life insurance?
Yeah, and the actors were getting death threats afterwards. People were so upset. I mean, people got really emotionally invested, and that was kind of the point we were trying to take with it, is know the difference between when you're storytelling, which is a big part of modern marketing, is coming up with cool stories that engage people, like Super 8, right, that's coming out right now. Great example of cool augmented reality or alternate reality stuff they're doing, but it's fake.
Yeah.
If you push the line too far and people believe you, yeah, bad things can happen.
So how is that any different than when people thought Blair Witch was real?
Well, and that's the thing, is I think between Blair Witch and Lonely Girl and all this other stuff that we've kind of gone through that to the point where everyone now is super skeptical. And I talked about that where we take that for granted, and a lot of time I've been involved in marketing plans where people say, oh, they'll get it. People will get it. And I'm always that guy who's like, Some people won't, and they will be upset if they don't get it, and they will say that you're hoaxing them, and there will be negative backlash. But you're right. I think because of some of those early things in America, we think everything's fake, whether it is or not. We're like, oh, that's fake right away. Everything's fake, fake, fake. Every photo of something cool is a fake photo.
That's a really good point, though. Like, don't try and fool people to the point where they are like emotionally invested in something, where they've put their support out there for something controversial just to, pull the wool off and say, oh, haha.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to show the practical benefit. If you're selling a product or a service, it's great to show the reality of it. But man, go find a real couple where that happened or something and tell their story. Don't just like make up stuff. But that was one where the extent of how bad the fail was, of where people were getting death threats, that's when you know that you probably drifted pretty far past the typical marketing disaster. So
understanding storytelling versus just completely lying to people, that's one that's one thing, one rule. Any other best practices to avoid some of these horrendous bad experiences?
Well, I mean, one that's gotten a lot of, that we talked about a lot and that everyone is talking about these days.
Big fails.
Yeah, is Twitter failures, of how many people are posting inappropriate things on Twitter or
trying to DM someone and then it actually goes public.
Whoops. And we actually asked, I thought this was cool, is my co-presenter asked the audience, how many of you have posted to the wrong account? And everyone raised their hand. And then how many of you have posted a DM publicly that you thought was direct? Everyone raised their hand. And so it's one of those things where we all point and laugh at people who get in a lot of trouble. The Secret Service, most recently, a Secret Service employee posted something inappropriate by posting to the wrong channel. Chrysler posted an F-bomb. A lot of these instances, it's easy to point, but we all do it. And so one of the things we talked about was use multiple apps for your client stuff. If you're representing clients, use 2 different apps. It's simple stuff like that I think if you're just thinking, using a little common sense.
And also beyond that, just know what channel to use for what. Like if you're going to be, kind of flirting with your significant other in sort of inappropriate ways, maybe don't use a Twitter DM, maybe just use a text message to their cell phone. I mean...
Yeah, let's save the sexting for the texting.
Exactly. Those pictures, maybe not something you want to be sending over certain channels.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons, too. People could get easily, hack into them, get copies of them. God only knows.
Yeah, and we talked
I'm not just talking naughty stuff, but, just things that aren't appropriate for a certain company.
Well, and I think the thing that really burned Chrysler was the young guy that posted a message through the Chrysler account was dropping an F-bomb about how bad Detroit drivers were. If you work for Chrysler, even through an agency, don't say that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just one of those things where if his bosses had seen him doing that through his personal account, they should have canned him anyway. So it's just one of those where I think supervisors need to take a little more time and focus on not just saying, oh, I hope that doesn't happen to us, but putting in safeguards like using multiple apps, explaining to their employees, hey, you can be yourself, but don't say inappropriate things that if it were seen in public or seen by our client, that they would get upset.
What is one of your own personal snafus that have happened with social media?
Oh man, I've been pretty lucky. There has someone actually this one my editor at Adweek still brings this up, is when someone wrote hashtag David Griner fail. That was his entire comment on one of my blog posts. And then we still bring that up. I don't even know what he was talking about. I think he just disagreed because several other people were like,
troll.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but I was like, every once in a while, if I screw something up, my editor just sends me David Griner fail. And then one guy posted, this is the stupidest thing I've ever read on one of my blog posts. And I replied back, joke's on you. It's not even the stupidest thing I've written. So, you just need some perspective, buddy. But, mostly I think the biggest backlash I've ever gotten is people disagreeing, because I usually take a pretty strong opinion on whether something is right or stupid or whatever. And people are welcome to disagree, but thankfully I haven't tweeted anything out completely disastrous through a client account. But
would you say that taking a strong stance like that has been really helpful for you as a blogger?
Yeah, I think it gives people a reason to read. If I sat around saying, here is a new ad from an insurance company, you should watch it. It contains messages about their insurance. I mean, who would read that? Like, the whole point of Adweek was that Adweek does a great job with really balanced reporting about marketing and advertising and media. And we take it from a blogger perspective of, I like to think we're still very neutral and balanced and we treat all the agencies equally, but at the same time, we're not afraid of, throwing some punches and saying, calling something racist or sexist. I mean, if we think it is, we don't need somebody else. Like a journalist would need someone else to say that for them. Yeah. Oh, we can just say it.
So there is a difference in your mind then between a journalist and a blogger.
Yeah, I mean, I've written for the print edition of Adweek, and it's a very different experience, not from how they edit it, but from how I approach it. I wouldn't write an article for a magazine or for a print. I come from a journalism background, and I wouldn't write those the same way I write a blog post, because a blog post, you're taking a stance, you're putting something out there, you're giving a perspective on something, whereas journalism is about educating people, showing people what's happening, and in my experience, trying to be as objective and letting everyone else tell the story for you. Blogging, I think you have to be a little more assertive.
Now, I have to sort of disagree with you on one part. You can be an op-ed journalist and do the same exact thing. So it seems like you're talking more about the actual channel versus blogger against journalist, or not even against, but the difference between.
Yeah, and not to slice it too fine, I would say that the distinction for me is that a good blogger is like a good newspaper columnist, where the great newspaper columnists, not on the op-ed page, but in the news side, they're not necessarily expressing an opinion. So much as just analyzing something and saying, I think they're calling a spade and saying this is stupid. The city is blatantly wasting money, when it's obvious that that's happening. Whereas on the op-ed page, it's about, oh, this is why we don't like the president or whatever. And so I think that's the line I try to walk as a journalist who's also blogging. Is it's okay to have an opinion, but it's not okay to have a slant. Does that make
That makes sense. And then it's a little bit different because you have also been a traditional journalist, so to speak, that's also a blogger. What is your take on the discussion that still exists out there between the purist blogging community, people that have, kind of raised up as bloggers, from the very early days of blogging, but don't have a journalism background, versus the people that did go to school for traditional journalism. There's certain ethics and whatnot that you're taught as a journalist, styles of writing, the things you're sort of talking about here. There seems to still be a disparity between a journalist and a blogger. Some journalists can also be bloggers like yourself, but there are some people that have sort of been, they rose up as bloggers without a journalism background. What are your thoughts on that? There's this notion of, are bloggers and journalists equal? Are they just different? Do they serve a different purpose? Does it help, to have a journalism degree and the things, the value that does come from that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that general discussion?
Well, I mean, that's a pretty big issue. I think coming to Blog World and seeing how loosely the word blogger really is now, because someone asked me, oh, that's a conference of bloggers. I was like, well, yeah, kinda. It's really more social media marketing and brands and all this other stuff. And if you ask everyone, I told someone, it's like saying, do you have a blog? Well, yeah, but I also have a business card. But that's not to say that my life is business card holder. That doesn't mean anything about me. I think that's becoming a little more normal, where having a blog is just something, I write one for one, I contribute to one, or my office has one, whatever. But to your question about journalists versus bloggers, I think that it kind of comes down to journalists, I think, can make good bloggers, like you said. They have a skill set that makes for awesome reporting and writing when they can loosen up and kind of break away from some of that AP-style traditional approach. Bloggers, the biggest weakness I've seen when they try to be more investigative and more mainstream is that they won't pick up the phone, they won't contact people to ask them before they blast them, And that's something that really bothers me is I don't do it as much as I should, but if you're going to really trash someone for a decision they made, this happened the other day with Good Magazine. They blogged about how dare Wired Photoshop this engineer on the cover to make her look sexier or whatever, and she responded back, it's like, they didn't. And they didn't do enough homework before pushing out a blog post.
And I think that's more, the discussion I keep hearing come up again and again are the things that, the important things that journalists do learn in terms of verifying sources, having multiple sources, understanding confidentiality, like there's certain things that you learn as a reporter. And that's not to say a blogger can't go learn that on their own, but some of the missteps that have happened tend to be lack of that experience.
Yeah, and I think journalism kind of beats into you this process of being objective, because being objective is not as easy as people think, because it means that you really have to challenge your own sense of what is right. So if someone tells you something, you're like, that makes perfect sense, that's what I'll put into my post. Well, man, I guarantee you if you go interview someone who disagrees completely, you'll start to realize, wow, they've got a point. And to me, I've kind of gone through my whole life thinking everyone has a point. Even if it's ludicrous, they tend to have some kind of point. Now, whether you agree with it or not, but that takes a lot of effort, and that's the big thing. Is I think a lot of bloggers, there's this, just keep cranking out the content, just get out a post, and we don't have time to ask people, these questions, and it's just, you can get away with that, and we've all come to accept it as a society. Oh, they screwed that up, they updated the post, and it's funny to me how many blog posts have, update, we were wrong, yeah, it turns out that's not what happened at all. That happens in journalism, but I just think a lot of times we have this fire it out mentality that it's kind of the last lingering negative of bloggers that I'd like to see them fix.
So would you say that it would be great to sort of find a happy medium between the rigidity that you see in journalism and then the shoot from the hip but honest perspectives that you see coming out of blogging, but yet kind of meeting in the middle where there's still accountability and responsibility that bloggers could really learn from the journalism side, and then the journalists kind of loosening up a little bit and kind of letting go a little bit from the rigidity that's there.
Yeah, and I think that's happening. I think bloggers are definitely influencing journalists.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of journalists who feel that's a bad thing. And then there's probably a lot of bloggers who feel that journalists becoming bloggers is a bad thing. The truth is that those lines are blurring more and more. I like to think I am a journalist by writing for a mainstream publications blog. I like to think that even the way I write for all my blogs, even marketing blogs, that I write from a very objective stance. So I think, I don't know as a global trend if that's happening, but I think you're seeing former Gawker editors becoming editor of New York Observer.
Right.
It's definitely, they're crossing back and forth, and that has a lasting influence, but I think hopefully it will just do away with this idea that blogging is one style of writing, and blogging is it's just a place where writing happens. Right. It's like magazines. Is there a magazine style of writing? Hell no, there's like 700,000 magazines.
That's a really good point. Really good point. Blog is another channel.
Yeah. I won't follow it up. That's probably the only good point I'm going to make today. So I'll just stop there.
Well, we'll stop on a high note. That was great. So everyone, this is David Griner with Adfreak at Adweek. So you could go to adweek.com or adfreak.com.
Yep. Either one will get you there.
Takes you to the same place, same mountain. Yep. All roads lead to the top.
Yes. You can find us. But adfreak.com, get the blog. We update it daily. Yeah, check it out. It's a great site.
Well, thank you for stopping by.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure. And let's keep in touch.
Will do.
Thank you. See you later. There you go, everybody. David Griner with Adfreak. And what are your thoughts?